Good morning. I make that 9 o'clock and in my new regime of starting on time. Hello and welcome to the first virtual NEC conference. This is a bit strange as you can't see how the audience are taking it. Thank you for logging on, joining us this morning in the UK. I understand we have delegates from around the world this morning, including Hong Kong, Australia, Vietnam, Singapore and Peru, to name a few. So a special thank you to all those who are attending. As COVID-19 continues to leave us in some uncertain times, we appreciate you connecting with us digitally and supporting the annual conference in its new format. I'd like to take this opportunity to celebrate some of NEC's biggest achievements in the time since we met last year. April 2019, Sydney Water, Australia's largest water and wastewater provider, announced it was using the NEC4 contract to support the rollout of its new procurement strategy, Partnering for Success. In July, NEC was used to facilitate the fast-track delivery of some $500 million of new and upgraded venue and facilities for the Lima 2019 Pan American Games. And as a result, the Peruvian government decree published that NEC contracts, among others, will be approved to be used on special projects. In November 2019, we celebrated the 10th anniversary of the NEC being used in Hong Kong at the Asian Pacific Users Group Conference. Hong Kong Airport Authority have let over $1 billion in NEC contracts, and we'll be hearing from the Airport Authority of Hong Kong on the 17th of June during the Global Reach session. Lantis in Belgium announced NEC4 was being used to procure a new £3 billion ring road in Antwerp, one of the largest NEC contracts let to date worldwide. Another project we'll be hearing about in our Global Reach session. More recently, Virgin Media has chosen NEC4 to deliver $2.5 billion of cable installation and maintenance works during the next 7 years. And this month, the Sheffield Hallam Alliance was announced using the NEC4 Alliance contract. So as you can see, lots of examples where NEC is going from strength to strength globally and in both the public and private sector. And we'll be showcasing some noteworthy NEC case studies in the next few days. Instead of the normal one-day event where we gather in one Great George Street, we're hosting the event over the next 3 days via a series of 1.5-hour interactive online presentations and workshops. So just a few housekeeping rules to be aware of. While the speakers are presenting, please put your mics on mute. You can ask a question through the presentation via the chat function. To ask a question, please either type the question in full in the chat on the Teams platform, and I'll introduce that question for you, or state in the chat function you'd like to ask a question verbally, and I'll bring you in order so you can pose your questions when availability allows. If you've attended the NEC Users Group Annual Conference in the past, you'll know the day includes updates from government, global case studies, best practice examples, new product features, and topical breakout workshops. Today, we'll feature Nick Smallwood, the CEO of the Infrastructure Projects Authority. He'll be updating us on the National Infrastructure and Construction Pipeline and how standardising contracts has increased productivity in industry. He'll be followed by Null Shira, Head of Construction Category in Crown Commercial Services, who'll do a presentation on managing the $30 billion 7-year Pan Government Construction Works and Services Framework and how this is shaping the public sector construction. The afternoon workshops will be on the NEC guidance and advice concerning COVID-19. Tomorrow's presentations will feature NEC case studies from Highways England and the Defence Infrastructure Organisation, as well as a presentation on the new NEC Facilities Management contract. The afternoon session will be a mock adjudication workshop. On our final day, we'll be starting off with our popular NEC Awards, which will be presented, of course, virtually, followed by case studies from Lantis in Belgium, Airport Authority in Hong Kong, and Shai Jackson from Vincent Masons will present a paper on the suitability of NEC as a global contract. We'll end the conference in the afternoon with a showcase of NEC New Digital Contract Horizon contract tool. Finally, I'd like to extend my thanks to all the speakers sponsors and supporters for taking part in this online conference. Just a quick note, it's now my pleasure to introduce our opening speaker, Nick Smallwood. Nick is no stranger to me, but some of you may not know him so well. Nick was appointed as the Chief Executive of the Infrastructure and Projects Authority, the IPA, and the head of the project delivery function for government. He was a former Vice President for Projects Engineering and Chief Projects Engineer at Shell, and became the Chief Executive of the IPA in August last year, and is responsible for leading the delivery of the major government projects across government. He joined the IPA with 37 years experience of managing complex project portfolios and having developed Shell's Global Project Academy, where he was accountable for managing how projects were delivered and a variety of significant improvement programs. In 2014, Shell won the APM Project Management of the Year award with Qatar Petroleum under Nick's guidance. He's also a trustee of the board of the Association of Project Management, so he has a great deal of experience, and I look forward to hearing his presentation. Nick, the floor is yours.
Thank you, David, and good morning, good afternoon to those on the call. Maybe we could go to the first slide, please. There's no denying that we're living in unprecedented times. The COVID-19 crisis has globally impacted in ways I don't think we've foreseen, and the construction sector is no exception. We saw this almost immediately with the construction sector, reduced productivity, workforce challenges, and supply chain issues. But the full extent to which COVID has impacted the construction sector is still unknown, and only time will show the impact and delays to projects. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So why is it important for the construction industry and the construction sector at large? I think the well-being and prosperity of everyone in the UK depends critically on how we rebuild our economy. I'm sure that's the same in many other countries around the world. And we need to transform our infrastructure and public services. The construction sector plays a crucial role in supporting the UK economy. It represents over 6% of the GDP and 7% of the UK's total workforce, and it's spread right across the country. But not only that, our infrastructure has been integral in the response to COVID-19. So by getting key workers to their critical jobs, moving thousands of tons of vital supplies by freight, and the removal of household waste from major cities, including London, just a few examples. Next slide, please. But like every crisis, we can't afford to waste it. We can't rest on our laurels, and we need to take the opportunity to drive a focus on greater productivity, improve resilience and sustainability, and it's never been more important than it is today. Now's the time for resilience and collaboration between government, industry and client partner groups. It's only if we work together, sharing lessons learned, insights and best practice, that we can emerge even stronger and be able to deliver the infrastructure that UK desperately needs. Next slide, please. Next slide. And so far, there has been a great deal of work going on in this space relating to collaboration. The government's already and will continue to collaborate and work with industry to ensure we emerge from the crisis with capability and capacity to support the economic rebuilding that will be so necessary. From very early on in the crisis, the IPA and the Department for Business, Energy and Strategy have worked closely with industry to respond to the crisis. This has been done through a number of working groups, including the Construction Leadership Task Force and the Infrastructure Client Group in the UK. And the government welcomes the roadmap to recovery, which the CLC set out, and looks forward to collaborating with industry on ensuring the construction sector recovers and restarts. Next slide, please. As I said, the government's already collaborated with industry on many proposals set out in the Construction Leadership Council's plan, and they include developing effective industry-led site operating procedures that comply with guidelines on social distancing and that can be effectively implemented on construction sites for the 2.4 million people currently working in the sector. We issued a general guidance note on responsible and fair contractual behaviours, and I would ask you to continue to make public use of these principles as we move forward in a more collaborative way. A procurement policy note which sets out information and guidance for public bodies on payment of their suppliers to ensure service continuity during and after the COVID-19 outbreak was also issued. And you will have seen a reverse charge VAT has been pushed back to 2021. Along with that, the government published the Building Safety Fund prospectus to provide details of how building owners can apply for funding to remediate buildings with non-ACM combustible cladding. So a lot of things going on directly with industry during the last few weeks. Next slide, please. And during these unprecedented times, we aim to give the market as much confidence and certainty as possible to help with business planning. The IPA's annual National Infrastructure and Construction Pipeline provides long-term visibility of sustained investment across economic and social infrastructure. And in response to COVID-19, this month, we're planning to publish a separate procurement pipeline to provide short to medium-term certainty across all sectors and help industry to make informed decisions as it recovers from the impact of the crisis. The IPA is working with departments and other organisations across the public sector to identify procurements ready to go out to tender throughout the 2020-2021 financial year. This will be followed by a full national infrastructure and construction pipeline, providing long-term visibility in the autumn, subject to ministerial approval. And we've also set up a Project Futures team in IPA looking at all this to help develop the strategic direction for project and infrastructure delivery, taking account of changes in technology, methods of working, and market capacity. Next slide, please. And as we move away from the immediate recovery of the construction sector following COVID-19, we need to think about how we want the future state of industry to look. We must drive productivity gains in the construction sector. We didn't go into this crisis in a strong place. We do need to seize this opportunity to make structural change. We need to reduce emissions and carbon in construction. We need to be looking at issues around design and procurement and developing a more sustainable business model that supports a carbon net zero economy by 2050. So a lot to do. And as we move into recovery and renewal, we will continue to prioritise the construction sector, and in return, we hope that you'll also prioritise reforms. Next slide, please. So, we need to deliver it in smarter ways. To recover stronger than ever from COVID-19, the construction industry needs to innovate and modernise. However, at the same time, we must not lose focus on getting the basics right every time. We need you to focus on improving construction productivity by delivering smarter infrastructure, using technology to our advantage, and utilising more modern methods of construction, which in turn provides other benefits, such as helping towards net zero by 2050. Next slide, please. As many of you may be aware, we're driving the implementation of Transforming Infrastructure Performance. This document was published a couple of years ago, and our ambitious plans for long-term transformation of the programme are in place, and we need to improve the delivery and performance across the whole of infrastructure. The programme has a particular focus on modern methods of construction and challenges the supply chain to take out waste. Through this work, we will challenge you to improve productivity and efficiency and innovate in order to support the net zero carbon emissions target, maintain our track record of delivery, and create a more resilient and effective supply chain. The government has identified 3 core areas in which there's an opportunity to use its levers to drive the scale and pace of change through the TIP programme. The first is smart construction, modern methods, including off-site manufacturing. The second is the use of digital technology to make new and existing infrastructure smarter, whether that be drones or the likes of 5D CAD in construction sectors. And the third is sharing of innovation and best practice to accelerate the improvements. Next slide, please. We're nearly a decade on from the publication of the 2011 BIM mandate, and 4 years since that mandate came into effect in 2016, which set out a requirement for centrally procured government projects to develop information in collaborative 3D environments. Now we should be seeing broad adoption of fully integrated BIM models, bringing together design, schedule, and cost to enable collaboration and decision-making and sequencing. The level of uncertainty in recent times highlights the advantages these technologies can bring to rapidly model the what-if questions. But we must go one step further and embrace all the technology that's available. We need to utilize tools such as 5D CAD to increase construction productivity. For example, 5D CAD will allow you to bring together 3D data, all the work planning, and develop advanced workplace planning documents to drive the construction to the critical path, knowing you have the materials available and you're following the critical path to completion effectively and efficiently. Tools like this will ultimately allow you to deliver quicker, smarter, and more productively. Next slide, please. And of course, our projects are delivered by people, but if we want to deliver in this smarter way, we also need to invest in the current construction workforce and attract new skills. We need to change our ways of working to make them more adaptable in the long term. We need to understand that shifts in technology, project requirements, and the economic and political landscape over the long durations of major projects cause scope, program, and budget challenges. In order to prepare for these shifts, we need to invest in the skills to manage technology more than ever before. We need to use technology to open up the next generation's eyes to the variety of interesting and fascinating jobs that exist within this industry. There's further work to be done to ensure we professionalize the project delivery functions across government, and building the capacity and capability across departments and delivery bodies is essential. In the IPA itself, we've put in place a new Project Futures team, which develops a strategic direction for project and infrastructure delivery, taking account of challenges in technology, methods of working, and market capacity. And we need to work together, both industry and government, in order to be able to achieve all that we've set out with the right people, capability, and capacity in place. And estimating and benchmarking are also hugely important. To drive productivity, we also need to get better, far better, and more consistent at estimating costs and developing benchmarking capability. We need to free scope and focus much on earlier in the initiation phase. As we know, the success or failure of a project is often determined in its early development stage. It's much harder to turn around a project further down the line if it's been badly conceived. And no amount of good engineering and management and construction will provide much resilience if you chose the wrong project to begin with. Even good project management will not recover the needed value added from a poorly selected project. And that's why the IPA recently published the benchmarking capability tool. This tool enables infrastructure organizations to effectively identify and score their benchmarking capability. For many large and complex projects, the tool can act as a valuable aid to build understanding and confidence in delivering project outcomes from the start. If organizations adopt the benchmarking capability tool, then it will become increasingly possible to compare benchmarking practices across the industry and provide opportunities to share lessons learned, insights, and practices from across organizations. Next slide, please. I said it was hugely important in the initiation phase to get it right, and that's why we need to target the front end of projects. We must stress the importance of accurately estimating the cost and schedule of a project at the outset. Inaccurate estimation of costs in the front end of projects may allow for inferior project ideas, which are subsequently approved and implemented. We need to ensure that the target of the front end of a project using benchmarking and should cost modeling is used to prevent the wrong projects from being selected. Next slide, please. But we'll only continue to improve and challenge if we're an expert client and we provide the space and environment for you to deliver this performance. Standardizing contracts will also play a significant role in helping to increase productivity rather than focusing people in the wrong place and wasting time and energy. I know a key part of the NEC is standardization to help reduce ambiguity and create greater efficiency of both client and supply chain by standardizing clauses that occur frequently and reducing unnecessary bespoke amendments made to standard forms. This very much chimes with the approach we're taking in government and to standardize and simplify construction infrastructure contracts. The government is often criticized about the bidding process for its contracts being unnecessarily time-consuming and complex, especially for SMEs. So for us, standardization has meant reducing the unnecessary bespoke amendments made to standard forms of contracts such as NEC, standardizing on those clauses that occur frequently across the public sector. Next slide, please. The IPA and Crown Commercial Services have worked together to develop boilerplate terms. These have been embedded into the CCS frameworks, and the NEC being the first contract focused on CCS worked, and we worked with the NEC to agree the final version. I'm pleased to report to you that the first contract under the 30 billion CCS construction works and associated services framework was made to an SME using an NEC form of contract. We believe this approach will create a more consistent and harmonised approach to procurement routes and will help to reduce ambiguity and create greater potential efficiency for both the client and the supply chain. We also need to ensure that we have the capability to help us manage contracts and relationships with suppliers. That's why the government is committed to invest in contract management training to improve the way we work with suppliers and manage our contracts. The government's developed training based on the contract management professional standards, and this is an initiative backed by every single central government department. Next slide, please. So let me sum up and conclude. I think the COVID-19 pandemic has had a profound impact on the health and economy of the UK, as I'm sure it has in other countries around the world. And as we begin to recover from this crisis, it's critical that we transform the way we deliver infrastructure to support the rebuilding of our economy and public services. To do this, we must drive productivity by delivering in smarter ways, investing in the right skills, and being an expert client. And I'm sure this holds for many other countries, but there is a winning capability in the UK. We're going to focus and work together to develop a future state that will leave our industry not just surviving, but thriving. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. We have about 10 minutes for questions. Could I ask people to raise a hand or type a question in if you have a question for Nick? So I've got a question here from Richard Patterson, who says, having only just seen the useful CCS framework boilerplate clauses, are they to be used across the UK government?
Right, gosh.
Is now exiting.
I sincerely hope so, David. It's early days, but wherever we can standardise, we should. I think it's just wasted energy when we continue to challenge individual clauses, unnecessarily so.
Thank you, Nick. I had a hand up there, but it's disappeared now. Is there any more questions?
David, it was from Robin Tulloch.
Yeah, Robin, do you have a question? No? Any questions for Nick from the audience? So Ben Hill, Ben, do you want to ask the question yourself? I've got a question here. Ben, do you want to answer it? Ask it. Okay, I'll answer it for you. Ben asked, what are the expectations in terms of the level of spend in 2021 versus the previous pipeline estimate? So, you know, are we expecting a reduction or an increase in work going forward?
So I'd ask people to be patient until we publish the near-term pipeline, which should, all things being equal, be out later this week, which will be great. And I think you'll see from that the near-term ambition. I think the Chancellor still has some work to do to identify where we go with our response to the National Infrastructure Commission. We're hoping to publish the NIS in the autumn. And there, I know this government has an ambition to level up and have what's called an infrastructure revolution. What's affordable, we'll find out in the fullness of time, but I certainly remain optimistic.
Thank you. So what else have I got? Have I got any hands up anywhere? People want to ask a question? So I've got one from Erica Dixon. For the procurement pipeline, will this include devolved government works, or will it be for England only? And will it be for England only?
We've done a ring round to the devolved nations. We're hoping to include as much as we can. I mean, there'll be a caveat on the accuracy of it, but where we can, we've included their figures in the pipeline that we'll publish shortly.
And another one, as you stated from Gary Buick here, at the start of your presentation, you said that COVID-19 had an effect on productivity. Do you have any benchmark data on how much that reduced productivity has been caused by COVID-19 and what effect it's had on the industry?
So it's been pretty varied. I think house building and construction where you can clearly socially distance quite easily, the productivity impact has been less than on some of the congested major construction sites. We saw initial drops to something like 30 to 50% productivity. That said, as companies have matured their understanding of social distancing, they've worked out how they can better organize the sites. We've seen productivity move up into the high 70s on a number of construction sites. So we're still learning and moving. And I think thanks to the work of the Construction Leadership Council Working Group and their publication of the site operating procedures, which are reviewed regularly, we are really focusing on what can be done to get ever more productive as time goes by.
Thank you. And the NEC team have come straight back saying we have a NEC4 users guide for selecting suppliers to support all contracts. And Robert Gerard has said, yes, there is a user guide, 1, 2 and 3 will help you there. So that came back fairly quickly. Any more questions for Nick? Okay, so another one, this is from James Ruck. Realistically, how close can you get to the standard form of contract of removing the Z clauses and other clauses in there, do you think, Nick?
That's a good question for all the contract managers around the room, isn't it? If you're going to be standardized and you tinker and you change, then you're not standardized. So the starting point should be what can you do to stay consistent and not have bespoke clauses. So I'm not going to give you a definitive, but certainly the more you standardize, the better the world will be.
Thank you. Any more questions? How, and this is from Mohammed Nassim, it says, how have you included COVID-19 impact in the risk profile of your new projects and and the current projects going forward?
So Mohammed, great question. Of course, we should be doing that. We work with the arm's length bodies and delivery bodies around government who deliver projects, and that's clearly a topic on their agenda. I think it's not so much a problem for new projects other than the fact they don't know how long this crisis will continue for. But I do think it's a problem for those projects in flight, which have been priced and cost estimated and contracted. And that's quite a complex and challenging space for people to operate in, which is why we issued the contract guidance for fair contracting. And we're working with our delivery partners right now on those big programs to understand where we need to get to and what we need to plan going forward.
And another extension on that from Robert Gerard is, how do you expect tenderers to price programs going forward, taking into consideration COVID?
Well, it's challenging, isn't it? We don't have a magic wand and we don't have a way of predicting the future. I think you've got to take a realistic and pragmatic view of it. I think it's probably unwise to go to lump sums in the current climate, but I think you should be making due allowance for some impact on productivity and some contractual agreement on when you change if the crisis suddenly comes to a halt.
And then following on from that is, should we add an extra clause about pandemics in contracts going forward?
No, I wouldn't do that. I think this is a once in 100-year event. And I think if you priced everything on the basis of it occurring more than once in 100 years, you'd never get anything done or anything priced reasonably. So I don't think that's a reasonable thing to do. The
next speaker, which is Noel Shira. Noel Shira is the head of the construction category for the Crown Commercial Services and leads the team delivering the 30 billion 7-year construction works and associated framework. This is the largest construction framework ever procured in the UK and has been designed from the ground up to support the collaborative delivery of construction policy in government and an alliancing approach to construction procurement. Noel's a chartered quantity surveyor with over 35 years experience delivering construction projects across multiple sectors. He's a fellow of the RICS and an ICE accredited NEC project manager. Noel, over to you.
Hello everybody, and thank you for giving us this opportunity to present at the user group session to tell you all about the Crown Commercial Service Construction Works and Associated Services Framework. I would like to get across to you this morning is something about the context of the framework, how we designed it, how we structured it, how we scoped the framework out to support a collaborative approach to the construction space, particularly how we have tried to use the framework to drive and support industry improvement. So to start with putting some context around the framework, Crown Commercial Service quite possibly is the largest public sector buying organisation that you haven't heard of. Within the construction sphere, we're a relatively new entrant for the major works construction, although we have been around for quite some time in terms of FM and the likes of consultancy. Essentially, we're the buying arm of Cabinet Office. We're the biggest public procurement organisation in the UK, and as it says on the slide there, we use our expertise to buy everything. Locum doctors' laptops, police cars, electricity, and the area we want to talk about today is construction. So we combine our procurement knowledge and our deep and expert knowledge of technical categories to derive the best value for money solutions for our clients. And in the last financial year, we helped 160,000 buyers to save over £1 billion worth of public money. Importantly, we're a not-for-profit organisation, so any surplus that is made heads back into central government. Now, what that means is that we set our levies very competitively, but also it means we can really focus deeply on providing appropriate technical solutions, and as I say, in this case, helping us to drive the industry forward. So just to flesh out a little bit how CCS is structured and how we fit into that, CCS has 4 pillars, as we call them: corporate, buildings, people and technology. And the buildings pillar is further subdivided into workplace, which is hard and soft FM, construction, and energy. So that's the purchase and supply of energy, amongst other things. And within the construction category, we have 4 further subcategories. So consultancy services, modular building solutions, building materials and equipment, and construction works. And taking those 4 subcategories together with our colleagues in FM and energy means that we can provide a complete support structure from cradle to grave right across the built asset life cycle, from the germ of an idea as a design through the construction, operation and maintenance phases, and sustaining that into the future and ultimately disposing of that in the future. And we're using, as it says there, using our extensive knowledge of all of those markets to provide effective and compliant frameworks right across all of those spaces. So picking up on the construction-specific frameworks there, we have the 4 frameworks: consultancy services, as I mentioned earlier, construction works, building materials, and modular building. And they provide an integrated approach right across all of those areas. So in any one project, you may call off one or more of those frameworks, and they're designed so that they work together in an alliance structure, so that they all support each other and operate in this integrated manner. And there are details provided there of the specific or more specific coverage of each framework and their periods of duration. So I want to set some context around the policy drivers that we took into account when we were designing the framework, probably some 3 years ago now. Nick's already talked about the transforming infrastructure performance document there, but there are a number of other key government strategy documents that we took as our primary points of reference. So things like the construction sector deal, Construction 2025, and the government construction strategy, as well as transforming infrastructure performance, and as well as a number of other documents, formed the backbone of the policy drivers that we referenced. And there's quite a consistent strand that flows through those documents. And these 8 or 10 points were the main themes that came out of those 4 documents. So making us better clients, driving collaboration, payment issues, supply chain resilience, technology has been referenced previously, improving productivity and value, really important, and reducing commercial friction. Encouraging the growth of SMEs is an important area, and benchmarking for improved future performance. Delivering social value, addressing modern slavery and net zero carbon. Now this list isn't exhaustive by any means, but they were the main themes that come out time and again through all those documents. And of course, NEC contracts support many of those areas. So things like providing a management system that makes us better clients and drives collaboration. Providing processes that mean we have fair payments and supply chain resilience. Improving value, reducing commercial friction, are all well supported by the NEC suite of contracts. So moving forward on to some social and environmental drivers for the framework. It's just a day over 3 years since the Grenfell Tower tragedy, and we were very aware that we needed to be able to use the framework to drive the industry forward in the most effective way possible, to take account of the inevitable recommendations that would come out of the Grenfell Tower inquiry, and things like the Hackett report. So that's been built into our framework structure. And then 6 months after the Grenfell tragedy, we had the situation with Carillion going into receivership. One of the biggest corporate collapses we've ever seen, £7 billion worth of liabilities. And really it drove a situation where we needed to make sure that we could manage our industry base in the best way possible to try and support resilience, and also to try and have a very, very clear understanding of how workload was spread across government. And then thirdly, although clearly we didn't reference this when we were designing the strategy, but it has proven to be the case that with the impact of COVID-19 now, we absolutely need to work in a collaborative and supportive manner to ensure the survival of the industry at the moment, and then in future coming out of that industry in the best coming out of that crisis in the best possible shape. And then finally, just looking at some delivery drivers. So the construction works framework has an applicability right across the public sector, across a multitude of work types and client types. And we needed to recognise that we needed a flexible call-off arrangement there, that it's not a one-size-fits-all arrangement. And although NEC contracts are the most commonly used in our pipeline at the moment, so they're by number about 65%, by value significantly higher than that, there are some users aligned around PPC 2000 and JCT contracts as well. So we needed to have that flexible arrangement that would support those clients as well as those using NEC. And many organisations use different contracts depending on different situations. We needed to facilitate all common procurement routes and strategies. So the government strategies documents that I referenced a minute or two ago very strongly support things like early contractor involvement, two-stage tender arrangements, But equally, there are still many contracts that are let on very traditional manners of single stage employer design contracts with a lump sum arrangement. So we needed the flexibility again to be able to deal with all of the common procurement routes, and to be flexible enough to take innovative approaches as well. And taking all of those drivers, those social, political and delivery drivers into account, it was very clear to us that we needed to structure the frameworks on an alliance model, and that only that would allow us to create this culture where clients and contractors can collaborate and drive for not just their project success, but also for industry impact. So, drilling down into the detail of the framework. The construction works framework is organised in 11 lots. There are 5 general construction works lots, and there are 6 specialist lots. So taking the general construction lots first, lots 1 to 5, they're organised in increasing value bands. So lot 1 starts up to 3 million, lot 2, 3 to 10, and then progressively getting higher until lot 5 is a lot that deals with projects over 80 million. In terms of regional breakdown, basically the lower the value of the lot, the greater the regional breakdown. So in lot 1.1, for example, the breakdown is into South England, North England, Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. When you come through to lot 4, England and Wales are combined as an area, and by the time you come to lot 5, it's a national lot. And that's just to recognise how the sector is organised in that marketplace. Lot 1 was designed to favour SMEs. So suppliers that wanted to tender for lots 2 to 5 were required to make a choice. If they wanted to tender for lot 1 as well, then they needed to specify which of those was their preference. So they could only be awarded a place in either lot 1 or in lots 2 to 5. And that was very successful in driving a situation for us where we have 136 suppliers right across all of the lots, and 58, I think it is, of those are SMEs. Moving to the specialist lots then, lots 6 to 11. Lot 6 is for residential works, 7 is for high-rise accommodation works, 8 for maritime, 9 for airfields, 10 for demolition and decommissioning, and lot 11 is for construction management. And this slide also shows how many suppliers per lot, whether that's a national lot or a regional lot, are available on the framework as well. And as I said, there are 136 suppliers there. Our current pipeline from launch in January, we've had 60 individual clients or departments have registered for use of the framework, and the opportunities pipeline is currently showing 41 projects and a value of over £770 million. So there's been a really healthy and rapid take-up in the early stages of the framework. In terms of the contract structure, the flexibility that we needed, that I've referred to, meant that we chose a standard document called the Framework Alliance Contract 1, published by ACA, and that is supplemented by the CCS framework requirements in exactly the same way as a standard NEC form would be supplemented by things like works information or scope and contract data entries. And one of the particular attractions of the Framework Alliance contract is that it has it can have multiple routes to call off. So in our case, we've scheduled all of the common all of the common NEC 3 and 4 contracts. So that would include, for example, professional services contract, the ECC clearly, short form, and also the NEC 4 alliance contract. Then also in terms of JCT contracts, all of the standard JCT contracts, and also their counterparts that are in use in Scotland, published by the SPCC. And then it also covers call-offs using the PPC 2000 ACA contract and the Term Alliance contract in that family as well. So any one of those standard forms can be used as a call-off. And then they're supported by, Nick mentioned earlier, the standard boilerplate amendments that CCS and IPA developed within the last 2 years, and I'll cover those in a second. And also it's recognised that individual projects and individual clients will undoubtedly need to use their own specific amendments to deal with particular project or client issues and risks. So there is a facility there for project-specific Z clauses to be incorporated. Just picking up on the boilerplate amendments, they were actually published in September 2018. There are separate documents published for NEC, JCT and PPC 2000, and actually there are separate documents for NEC 3 and NEC 4. And the standard boilerplate amendments pick up those 17 or 18 areas identified there, and essentially introduce standard clause modifications to allow the contracts to be used in conjunction with government departments. So things like Freedom of Information, Official Secrets Act, how to deal with intellectual property rights, etc. are included in there. And there's a specific one in there in terms of the Ministry of Defence DEFCON requirements, how they're incorporated into contracts. The intention with these is that for internal government departments would use these as they stand, but strike out any that aren't appropriate. And they also form the basis for wider public sector to use these amendments in their own contract arrangements. So how does the CCS framework drive collaboration and innovation? Well, each of the lots that I described earlier is set up as a separate legal alliance. And what that means is we establish a collaborative approach to the objectives, risks, success factors that are particular to that particular market sector. So for example, Lot 10, demolition and decommissioning, has very, very different objectives and risks compared to maritime works or compared to high-rise accommodation works. And we can, using the alliance structure, we can differentiate in the way that these lots are managed and driven forwards in terms of those particular objectives, risks, success factors, etc. And when clients join the alliances, they become a member of one or more of the lot alliances depending on their anticipated activity. So each individual alliance becomes an alliance between Crown Commercial Service as the framework managers, the contractors that were successful on that particular lot and are providing the services, and the clients who choose to join that particular lot alliance. And the structured manner that we intend to drive collaboration and innovation in the framework is we're just establishing at present what we've called alliance focus groups. And the intention of those alliance focus groups is that they will be groupings of contractors and clients from across the different lots that will form sort of relatively small but effective groups to drive forward areas that truly will make a difference either to the framework itself and how we deliver that, or in terms of industry, and ideally both. So the sort of areas that we would look at covering and that we're setting up at present is obviously COVID-19 recovery. How do we work together as customer and contractor to drive COVID-19 recovery? How do we work together to drive supply chain financial resilience? How do we improve projects by using sub-alliancing arrangements? How do we really well bring in social value measurement into our contracts? And how do we maximize opportunities for SMEs and allow them maximum benefit through the framework? And then, of course, how do we work in the future to drive the modern methods of construction and the net zero carbon agendas? So that, again, that list isn't exhaustive. They're the key focus areas that we're looking at the moment that we believe will truly drive improvement in both the framework and the industry. And then in terms of continuous improvement within the Alliance, Crown Commercial Service, we very much see ourselves as providing the link between contractor groups and client user groups so that we can provide guidance, feedback and continuous improvement between those two groups with benefits across the 7-year programme. So we're already seeing things like contractor groups that we're engaging with, giving us feedback that, for example, at present, maybe not quite enough information is being given out about intentions of how to manage COVID by client groups. And we can feed that information back into our guidance and specifically back into call-offs that we're actively engaged with to drive that improvement and allow contractors to make more informed choices on their procurement strategies. Finally, I would just like to talk about how our framework is driving supply chain integration. So illustrating a not untypical program of works here for a client to have, say, some accommodation project, to have a data center associated with that, and to have a district heating system that links the two. So lots of interfaces and constraints between those three projects. Typically that client will also engage with designers. There will be materials that are procured and ultimately an FM provider and possibly an FM consultant during the works. And what our framework allows that client to do is to create a sub-alliance that wraps around all of those different players, including the client, as an autonomous program sub-alliance. And that allows the client and all of those contractors, maybe 3 contractors, it may be 1 contractor doing 3 different projects, all of the designers, the FM provider, materials providers, key people, to take a common collaborative approach to program, risk, success measures and incentives. And we believe that's a truly game-changing option to have in our frameworks. We've seen it recently in terms of Sheffield Hallam University Alliance that's recently been announced using the NEC4 alliancing contract. And that's one of the ways that our framework could be used, would be to use the NEC4 alliance contract as a call-off to create this type of alliance. And equally, we can use the framework alliance contract at another level to pull together all of these contracts as a sub-alliance document. As I say, we see that as being a real game changer. So, thank you for listening. I hope that's given you an insight into the framework and into how we're truly trying to drive collaboration through our alliancing process so that we not only provide really good value for money, but we also provide excellence in project delivery and we also, importantly, provide we support change in the industry. If you have any queries from that, please use any of those contact details to contact me. Otherwise, thank you for listening.
Thank you, Noel. Any questions for Nick, myself, or Noel, and we'll see how that goes. I'll try my best to manage that.
Yeah, thanks, David. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can.
That's good. Yeah, I was following all the government public procurement notices, basically telling the employers to be gentle and kind to contractors. But what I didn't see was what seems to me is a common sense was for project managers to be told to just say comply with the guidance, comply with this industry guidance. Every contractor who's a director knows that if they don't comply with the guidance, they risk being sued by their employees later. So it's obvious that they've got to comply with this guidance. And if only government PMs would just say comply with the guidance, that straight away triggers a compensation event and stops us arguing for the next 3 years on whether or not it was a 60.119 prevention occurrence. I just can't understand why that wasn't said more positively. Any thoughts?
Scott Dixon will be able to help. I'm not a lawyer by trade. I mean, one of the things is because it is guidance, and the fact that it's guidance means that we would hope that people would move in the spirit of it. There is also some, how can I put it, some ambiguity about the effect it has with PPN 02 as well. We brought up PPN 02 for an extension of time. We're hoping that the industry, along with the CLC, in the same way that we've started the CLC collaborating across all parts of the industry, will start to take a pragmatic approach. Because even though NEC is a great document and a fantastic contract, it's the spirit that you carry it out in, and we're aware that the spirit you carry it out in that really helps towards that. And I don't know if some of the NEC contract writers are in here, but the idea was we wanted people to collaborate and the guidance we put out, because I think there are lots of different issues coming up. You know, I work on the cladding, and there are some difficulties with the 2 meter distancing rule. So we just wanted people to be grown up. Is there anybody on there from NEC who's got any comments?
Can I add something to David?
Yeah, of course you can.
Yeah, thank
you. No, you're going to have to speak louder. I don't think the mic's picking you up occasionally.
Is that better? There are lots of activity going on within government to support in response, and the general guidance within government has been that the contract should be followed, but exploring the collaborative ways that can happen. So I think informally in unpublished information that has been a driver. The external guidance has been much more aligned just specifically to the PPNs that have been issued.
Thank you, Noel. Another Robert Gerard, do you want to see if your mic will work and see if you can ask the question yourself, Rob?
Sure, I can do that. So it's about the boilerplate clauses, really, just to get a bit of context. And one in particular close to my heart, fair payment, as is Rudy Klein. So we've got the Fair Payment Initiative in government. Maybe that's 10 or so years old now. That's all about payment within 30 days. We've also got in place those contracts entered into under EU law, which is 30-day payment terms maximum for the top 2 tiers. Presumably that's now enshrined in UK law, so that stays the same. We've also got mandated central government using PBAs on jobs over 5 million. So just wondering exactly what is the fair payment boilerplate clause that adds to this lot?
Firstly, let me clear up. There is no mandation in central government on PBAs on jobs over 5 million. That's not in there. There isn't a clause in there. It states that PBAs will be used unless there are compelling reasons not to use them. So there is that first of all. The 30 days are in there, and they are enshrined in law for public sector central government contracts. That it's not again mandated for local authorities, and people sometimes don't understand that. So the boilerplate clauses for central government will cover all those things that you talked about, Rob, which will say that you must pay within contracts within 30 days. And I think Noel, if he can come back on, will confirm that. But that is for some central government departments. That doesn't include local authorities and some arm's length bodies. Noel, do you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, the framework absolutely enshrines all of that, as well as various other issues, such as the joint being member of the prompt payment code. The boilerplate clause is more about flowing those provisions down through the supply chain. So it doesn't modify those. They're already incorporated, but it does extend those down the supply chain.
Does that answer your question, Robert?
Was that okay? If anybody, what I would say is if anybody wants to search for decent construction framework, you'll find our website, and the boilerplate clauses are available there to look at.
Okay, I was just going to say, yeah, sorry, I put myself back on mute, but we have countless chances to actually make a real significant difference with payment, and we seem to miss them all. Why not just mandate PBAs on all jobs over 5 million? Exactly what is the sticking point? Because then you will revolutionise the industry overnight. If people get paid the whole supply chain pretty well within a week or so, that would just add such a significant benefit to industry. What is the fear? Why pussyfoot around, really?
There isn't a fear. First of all, PBAs are not the answer to prompt payment. They are a partial answer. Also, they only cover the people. It's a trust fund. So the only people, if you're not named, you're not covered in it. So it actually doesn't cover all the way down the whole supply chain. And in some cases, for instance, where we don't use PBAs on some of the network rail contracts, then we've got them paid sooner because we're using digital payment. So PBAs are just one part of the solution. And this idea that PBAs will protect the whole supply chain is not true.
There are joining deeds. We actually provide for joining deeds for anybody else at time of tender who's not a part of it. Why not look at advance payment? Why don't we tackle payment seriously? Let me turn it on its head. Let's tackle payment seriously. Let's look at advance payment.
And I think you're right there, Robert. And I'm, as you know, I'm also, very for advance payments. So one of the things is we brought the prompt payment code in, wasn't working as well as we expected. So I think there'll be some emphasis on the prompt payment code. And we have had quite a few successes. As I say, if we look at Network Rail, if I look at Environment Agency, even and one of the areas that don't use public bank project bank accounts is the Department for Education, and they're pretty good on their payment. So if you look at the 30-day payment terms, I think you'll find that they have got better. There are areas where it's bad, and we've asked them to do advanced payment terms, as you're probably aware. We brought up for during this crisis. There's been a whole load of stuff put out on it, and the government is very keen to make sure that we pay all the way down the supply chain. And the difficulty, as you know, is getting beyond the first and second tier suppliers. So I think what we need to do is concentrate on getting it down there, Robert. So this government is really, really serious about ensuring that payment goes all the way down the supply chain. So I've got another question here, and it might be from Stephen Cullen. Stephen, what's your question? Okay, I'll ask this question, a similar issue, and this might be for Noel. Save for at-risk supplies, the revised PPN appears to signal a return to pre-COVID-19 state as far as possible. Do you think we've missed an opportunity to change the industry for the long term? Stephen, it'd be good if you could come on, because could you expand on that, please? Where do you think the opportunity has been missed?
Shall I start the ball rolling on that, David?
Yeah, please.
Okay, I mean, policy, but the PPN4 that was issued last week, I think, is related to the immediate response. In we need to have a better understanding of the extent and the likelihood of reoccurrence. I think in terms of the immediate emergency reaction of keeping suppliers afloat, I think it's absolutely right that the PPN should focus on how we continue that support, but recognise that we need to move that to a sustainable position. And that really is, as I read it, the focus of the PPN4. I think in terms of opportunity to change industry for the long term, again, I apologise if the sound was poor and didn't get picked up, but there's effort within our framework as well as in many other parts of government to try and look at improvements in industry to try and support the long-term drive through. So certainly within our focus groups that we're operating, we'll be looking at that.
Thank you. And Nick, you want to come in?
Yeah, David, I think this is a really important point. I know Noel's audio wasn't that strong, but you heard me say that we want to not just come out of this surviving, but we want to be thriving. That means we do need to reset the construction sector in the UK. I think to perpetuate poor payment, to have multiple tiers of subcontracting without true accountability at the top, with little to no training and skills development, with very, very narrow margins, is not sustainable. So you see in the Construction Leadership Council's restart program, they talk about restart, reset and refresh. And we had great conversations with the chairs of the CLC last week. We are active in government to look at what does a sustainable industry look like in the future, and how do we collaborate with the CLC and others to drive towards that end state. And it will mean changing in the marketplace, but hopefully for the better. We simply must invest in the future, and you can't do that against the current sector structure and organisation as it stands. We published an update to the outsourcing playbook last week across government, but interestingly, the focus in that on construction is very, very light. So we are going to have an addenda developed across government in the construction space, working with Noel's team to really step up in this space going forward.
Thank you, Nick. Any more questions for Nick on? So I've got Richard Patterson. Richard, can you come in? I think people are having problems getting the audio to work. If you can't get it to work,
I think I'm okay. Yeah,
good.
My mic seems to do the trick. Yeah, it's quite funny. Literally yesterday, I was looking at a contract like you do on a Sunday because I'm sad. And I come across these CCS boilerplate amendments, and I'd be interested to know to what extent NEC themselves have sort of had a look at them and said, yeah, they look all right. And then secondly, if they are, quotes, all right, is there a plan to publicise them more widely? Because, of course, we do see every lawyer all over the place and every client all over the place saying something about IPR and freedom of information, all the rest of it. So are these to become the sort of pick and choose standard for future use of NEC?
In the public sector.
In the public sector, sorry, yeah. Well, I say, yeah, most of it's public sector, but not all of it. You know, private sector clients want to write some words on IPR, for example.
So Noel, again, do you want to come back in on that? And if there's anybody on the NEC, I believe you've been working with the NEC, haven't you? I'll see if I can get
Absolutely.
Noel in.
So when we were developing them, we were working closely in conjunction with NEC, certainly before they were finalised. So yes, there has been close consultation with NEC before they were issued in a current form. In terms of application across wider public sector, they're very, very closely aligned to central government. Within our framework, we are promoting them for use within the wider public sector, although there may be odd little bits that just need to be reviewed to check that they equally apply there. In terms of extent into the private sector, I can't really comment on that, although I totally take on board what you if was there, for example, I don't see any reason why that shouldn't form the basis of something that would apply in the private sector as well, but something that's within our ambition.
Thank you, Noel.
Does that help, Richard?
Yes, thanks. That's good. I mean, obviously, if they're there, your average local private sector guy is not going to pull in the words for freedom of information. But like I say, if these are sort of widely available as sort of NEC OK pick and choose Z clause, then that I think takes us forward.
Thank you. Nick, question for you. This is a really good one from Rebecca. Is one of the key elements to revolutionise the industry will be the support to SMEs. What does the framework do to support the SMEs in our industry?
I'm not sure what framework we're talking about, but what I alluded to in terms of the work in collaboration with the CLC, we haven't even started that work yet, but clearly SMEs are a key part of the supply chain, and we need to consider how best they fit in going forward.
Thank you. Any more questions? We've got about another 5 minutes worth of questions. If anybody's got a burning question to ask, either Nick or Noel.
David, just while we're waiting for any other question, just in terms of specifically in terms of the construction framework and SMEs, the design of the framework did very much focus on supporting SMEs in the lower value lots, and not quite ring fencing them, but encouraging separating that space and the SMEs having that available to them, and that's been quite successful. We've got 136 suppliers across the framework, of which 50 I think it is our SMEs. So yeah, that's been really strong. One of our focus groups is going to be in terms of SMEs, and we work with them to drive them forward in the industry and make as much opportunity available for them as possible.
Thank you, Noel. Got a question here from Mohammed. Mohammed, can you take your mic off and see if it'll work? I'll answer the question. Oh, you there?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. So I'm just wondering. So we have something in place for the COVID situation, but in terms of any, God forbid, if the COVID wave is returned or extended, how the industry, we have discussed the current situation or current year profile, but not have taken account for the future. So my question is, or my comment is, how we could prepare for the wave 2 or any extended COVID. Over to you.
Noel, do you want to ask that one? How would we deal with an extended COVID?
Oh, that's probably for individual government customers to look at. We have an internal arrangement whereby all departments come together commercially and do review these things. And one of the areas we are looking at is sharing best practice in how contracts are set up so that things like a second wave can be dealt with. So are arrangements such as having a COVID management plan incorporated into the contract that I've seen, so that there's a clear baseline expectation of how future contracts are dealing with COVID, and anything outside of that might become a compensation event. In terms of how the industry should prepare for that, I think probably outside the remit of our framework.
David, maybe I could comment. I think there's great examples such as Wellingborough Prison, who really didn't stop working through the COVID crisis. They were very, very agile to adapt their site operating procedures and practices. And I think that's where it'll be key if there is a second wave, to make sure you've got robust processes to work safely and continue to work safely. It's highly likely that projects themselves won't be so much of an issue, but public transport and transport of workers to the construction sites may be impacted by a second wave. But let's hope that we don't see one.
Thank you, Nick. And Ian's come on to the chat line to say NEC will be looking at how to deal with COVID-19 and new contracts in the workshop session this afternoon. So for those of you that want to get into more detail, that's probably a good workshop to be involved in. Do I have any kind of last questions for Nick or for Noel? I don't see any hands up. So I don't have any, I don't see any more on the, oh, is that one coming in? No, okay, yeah, thank you, Mohammed. I know it's been a bit difficult this first session. We've had some audio problems, but thank you for everyone that has been involved. You can see up now the contact details. There is, if you want to ask further questions, you can get hold of them on info@neccontract.com. Also, if you've got any further questions throughout the conference, I'm sure Shearer will be able to pass them on to either Nick or myself. I'd just say thank you to everybody that's managed to put up with the problems on the audio, sorry. And thank you very much to Nick Smallwood and Null Shira for spending the time. Thank you all and have a good day.